There was a woman in Texas who recently attempted to go to church. She wanted to go to church. She went. And then when she got there, they kicked her out. Why did they kick her out of church? Why did they kick her out of church? And the answer, I'm going to show you in a second here, is that, well, she's blind. This woman's name is Marie. I'm going to show you her picture because she ended up speaking to the local news about this. Marie went to church with her service dog to attend a church service, and then they kicked her out because of her service dog, which is horrible. And I want to show you this right here. This is an article from the local news station in Texas. I had somebody say to me on Sunday, well, I'm not denying you, I'm denying your service animal. Well, by extension, you are denying me because Betty and I are a cohesive unit. Her dog's name is Betty. And later on, she said, there was just this feeling of being turned away, this feeling of embarrassment, this feeling of being excluded from something, Marie said. Or Mari said. So basically, a blind woman and her seeing eye dog, her service animal, went to church and then they kicked her out for bringing her dog. And when the reporter, I'm not going to name her because I don't want people to be annoyed at her, but when the reporter for this news outlet did the segment on this church and of Marie, she did not name the church. And the reporter explained her decision by saying, turns out the organization did not break any laws, which is true, because some of you may be thinking of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which says service animals are allowed in public places. But of course, churches are not public. They don't have to play by those rules. And the church is legally within its rights to tell Ramos to get out. I mean, they can do that with gay people. They can do that with trans people. They could do that with people of color if they wanted to, and everyone else they feel are beneath them. And in this case, they kicked out this blind woman and her service dog. But I'm saying, like, just because they're legally allowed to do it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, of course, right? And according to Ramos, they asked her in this news segment, like, so what did they say to you? Did they just say we're kicking you out because it's a dog? And no, the answer was someone at the church said, we have a live band for our worship services, and there are also flashing lights. And those would not be, quote, appropriate for a service animal. And okay, I get where they're coming from, but like, why are you making that decision on her behalf? Why not tell her, you should know your church service has music and flashing lights, and is your dog going to be okay with that? And if she says yes, because she knows her service dog better than they do, then let her in. I mean, service dogs are trained to deal with this type of stuff. They're trained to deal with distractions like that. You know, if service dogs can guide blind people through traffic and crowded places, I feel like they can handle loud noises and bright lights. But if they can't, let her make that decision. Don't make it for her. And it's kind of frustrating that the news outlet did this story without naming the church because it lets the church get away with this sort of behavior. But I think that's also a reminder that, like in so many situations, the government, as soulless, as heartless as, you know, people like to make it out to be, sometimes it's the government that's on the forefront of these issues. The government is more moral and ethical, while churches only pretend to be. And this is a perfect example. Like when it comes to public policy, the government's job is to set bare minimum limits. Like you got to do the bare minimum here, but hopefully different groups go above and beyond. Like if the government says the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, that doesn't mean you're supposed to give $7.25 an hour, but you would go lower if you could. No, it means that's the bare minimum, but hopefully you're given a lot more, 15, 20 bucks an hour, because that's what a good company would do. And here's a perfect example. The Americans with Disabilities Act says public places have to accommodate service pets. And here's a church saying, we don't have to, so we're going to be cruel and we're going to kick this woman out. Like, leave it to a church to look at public accommodations and think, we can do worse. And it's not even the first time this has happened. There was an article in 2019. Check this out. This is in South Carolina. Totally humiliated. Blind man and service dog turned away from South Carolina church. And that guy was a veteran. And they told him, that church told this guy, we can't let dogs into our church because of safety. Here's a story that's even worse. And I remember this, even though it happened like 13 years ago. Check this out. This is from a local news station as well. This girl was diabetic. This is in 2012. This girl was in fifth grade. She attended a private Christian elementary school in Oregon, and the school said, well, you can't bring your dog in here because it's distracting or it'll make a mess in the building. Check this out. She and her mom, Debbie, recently asked her school permission to bring the service animal to class, thinking they were covered under the ADA, which, again, like I said, they're not. And the school said no. School administrators worried other kids might suffer from pet allergies, classmates would be too distracted, or Bassie, the dog, would simply make a mess in the school building, which, again, these are service dogs. They are literally trained to not do these things that some random dog would do. So, I mean, just unnecessary cruelty, right? We are always told these stories of how Jesus healed the blind. Well, these Christians kick them out. I mean, the service dogs were doing more to help these people with disabilities than the church staffers were. I guess if there's a silver lining to this story, it's that this woman found out the church is a horrible place, like right up front. Because a lot of people, including people watching this video, you might attend a church for many years before you realize what a horrible place it is. So I'm glad she found out early. By the way, in case you're wondering what church this was, I will tell you, I think I know which one it is. I looked it up. I found reasonable evidence to tell you I know which one it is. However, I wanted confirmation, right? And I reached out to everyone I could think of involved in this story, involving this woman. I reached out to the church. I reached out to friends of this woman. Like, someone tell me what church this was. Is it this church? I think it's this church. And no one would confirm this for me. And so, as far as I could tell, they haven't outed the church yet. And I'm not going to here because, again, I'm not going to say it unless I know for sure. But again, it is frustrating, right? That this church does something horrible, but because they didn't break the law, they're probably going to get away with it, which I find very frustrating. I will stop there for now. We'll take questions. Service animal does not equal emotional support animal, but I guess they never got the memo. Yeah, service animals are trained to literally deal with, I think, like, right, loud noises, things like that, to be non-problematic in these public spaces and stuff like that. I don't know what the emotional support animals are trained, how they operate. I don't know enough. Why am I talking? Let me get to the next one. I bet they let guns in their churches. They have problems with service animals? Fair point. Fair point.